Mother, I bring you fresh prey.
You are so kind to me, daughters. Now, let's take a look at him. Well, Ethan Winters. You escaped my little brother's idiot games, did you?
Poor Ethan Winters. Just after he started to settle down and enjoy family life, out of nowhere his wife gets shot, daughter kidnapped, until he once again finds himself embroiled within another eerie conspiracy that sees him waist high in nightmarish monsters. It's sure to be quite the weekend. Luckily for us though, his grief is our gain, as Resident Evil Village marks a strong continuation of the franchise's recent swerve into a more claustrophobic brand of survival horror. Mechanical improvements may be minor, sure, yet overall this is about as inventive and terrifying as Resident Evil has ever been. Village pays respect to the events and tropes that have come before, while still finding room to take risks. I'm Aaron from Console Deals, now let's get into why. The first thing to mention is that Resident Evil Village is an outright beautiful game. From the oddly enticing beauty of the Eastern European village itself that's been frozen over, to the lavishly glossy and wet-looking interiors of its more ornate structures. Capcom's A-Team have proven themselves masters of environmental design before, but here, every location you explore boasts an impressively noticeable lived-in feel. Books sprawled out over the mantelpiece, tipped over barrels spewing what appears to be red wine. All of this comes together to create a deeply unsettling atmosphere, to the point that the graveyard often felt like the safest location. The titular village portion of the game plays a larger role than even what Resident Evil 4 alumni will likely expect. And though much smaller by comparison, frequently returning to it often to discover new routes and pathways is always excitingly tense. The same can also be said for the much publicised Lazy Dimitru's castle. Anyone who's already indulged in either the maiden demo or the other few from the past few weeks will have some idea of what to expect from this domain, but again, there's plenty of surprises to see when traversing the castle from cellar to roof. Full of engaging yet not overly elaborate puzzles to solve and important story context to uncover, Castle Dimitru is yet another iconic Resident Evil location. Lady Dimitru herself is also a commanding villain for the time she's featured, especially during sections where she persistently follows you around environments Mr. X style, and you have to think on your feet about which castle route you'll need to take next. She's not quite as intimidating or unpredictable as the Resident Evil 2 remake's relentless stalker, true, but this is more than made up for by her constant teasing.
So we finally meet.
It isn't too much of a spoiler to say that her curvaceous figure doesn't stay that way for long, and that facing the internet's favourite tall vampire lady in her final form makes for a fun set piece. One that's indicative of Resident Evil Village's tendency to have boss fights play out cinematically despite their up-close and personal nature. It's a tricky art to balance, but this is one of the better traits Resident Evil's 8th mainline entry successfully carries over from Biohazard. There's so much more to Resident Evil Village's structure, story and setting which I'd be remiss to mention in explicit detail. However, just know going in that there's a lot more to all three of these aspects than Capcom's marketing would have you believe. As mentioned in the introduction, this is a game unafraid to take risks, featuring so many narrative twists and rug pulls that I was never quite sure where the horrific journey would take me next. Chris Redfield's involvement in the whole matter, for instance, though providing some much needed connective tissue between Village and the rest of the series canon, turns out to be one of the less surprising aspects. His inclusion is fine, yet it says a lot that his role is quite inconsequential to Ethan's story in the long run. Village's new cast of villainous cretins were well defined enough on their own to always keep me engaged and encouraged to press on. Speaking of which, although the series' traditional undead zombies are indeed present here, the new Lycan enemies are a more than worthy substitute. As an upgrade to the last game's sludge-based Moulded, they never disappoint, able to move at speed, swerve out of your line of fire, and easily overwhelm should you let them get the better of you. Admittedly, I was initially unsure about whether Resident Evil was venturing too far into Twilight-esque territory with the addition of werewolves and vampires, but both make sense for the story and Help Village's setting boast a distinctly supernatural atmosphere. Your first meeting with the Lycans occurs extremely early on in the campaign, and it's not hyperbolic to say that it plays out as one of the most terrifying Resident Evil encounters ever. Another highlight is a particular sequence where your weapons are completely taken away from you for a short while. Here, the emphasis on true survival horror is upped as you try to outwit and hide against a truly unsettling enemy. All as you hunt down the different solutions needed to escape a building infested with creepy China dolls. Most of the terror here may ultimately be scripted, yes, but it's a perfect example of Capcom being smarter about its brand of horror. Long gone are the days where you're punching a boulder surrounded by a pool of lava in order to save the day.
Come on, give me your hand!
That's not to say that Resident Evil Village doesn't turn that action up to 11 every once in a while. Some of Ethan's weapons can actually pack a huge punch, especially in the final hours, should you choose to upgrade them enough, and it can be gratifying to take the fight back to the folk you once feared. Improving your gear is as simple as visiting the new merchant character the Duke whenever he appears, who offers everything from weapon upgrades to ammunition recipes and even meals that can permanently enhance Ethan's traits. You'd think that Village introducing a crafting system would lessen the survival horror aspect, but you can rest easy knowing that you still always have to scrounge around to find raw materials needed to keep you well stocked.
Louisa! Open up, it's me, Elena!
Stop shouting, you'll draw the monsters!
Finishing the campaign took me 9 hours on the standard difficulty, but there was definitely more time I could have spent hunting down all the collectibles and optional items littered around. Plus, it's hard to complain about length when Village feels perfectly paced for the most part, and you can always supplement the adventure by chasing high scores in the Mercenaries, which makes its grand return here. Playing out in first person definitely gives this fan favourite mode a different flavour than before, but it's still structured similarly and plays out at a much faster pace as the enemies needed to progress simply keep on coming. Your goal is to kill as many as possible within the given time limit to reach the highest score, and your ability to buy more upgrades in between areas while smashing blue orbs to gain different gameplay buffs like improved health and headshots that do more damage help make it a cathartic arcade romp. Generally, the Mercenaries offers a good respite, and it's nice to see it return in this fashion.
Nobody. There was an accident down the road and... What's going on?
Overall, Resident Evil Village is an impressive survival horror package that continues Capcom's winning hot streak with the franchise. By not resting on its laurels and continuing to place almost all facets of horror in front of the player at some point, Ethan's follow-up story is an appropriately terrifying jaunt through one of the best realised locations we've seen yet on the next generation of consoles. Village is proof that quality will always trump quantity in terms of scale and length, yet it still finds the time to innovate in some unexpected ways. And even during the odd event where this experimentation isn't so successful, you quickly forget about such misfires thanks to bigger, better scares lurking just around the corner. Simply put, Resident Evil Village is the new standard for survival horror. We give Resident Evil Village a 5 out of 5.
Hey, can you hear me?
It's you, the child's father.
Hey, wait.